Mr. Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you very much. Today is Thursday, May 19th, in our Committee on Licenses and Inspections. Good afternoon. Before we begin the public hearing, I will make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat of public health from COVID-19, City Council committees are currently being held remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make those remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view the offering public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the Inquirer and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. McGonigal, will you please call the roll to take attendance from members in attendance? Please indicate your name and say you are present. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilman Dom.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and Sean and colleagues present.
Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues in Philadelphia. I'm present.
Councilman O. And Councilman Squilla.
Good afternoon, everyone present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present and the hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing on the Committee of License Inspections regarding bills number 210677, 210740, 220110, and 220221. I would like to note that the bill number 220115 is being held at the sponsor's request, and we request it at the call of the chair. Mr. McMonigal, can you please read the titles of the bills?
Bill number 210677, amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code by modifying when notice must be given regarding demolitions, all under certain terms and conditions. And Bill number 210740, amending Chapter 9-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Trades and Chapter 9-3000 entitled Sheet Metal Technician to create a license requirement for mechanical system contractors and to modify licensing requirements applicable to sheet metal system technicians, all under certain terms and conditions. And Bill number 220110, amending Section A-303 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Demolition and Relocation of Structures to add additional requirements for the issuance of demolition permits for structures currently or previously used as religious facilities, all under certain terms and conditions. And Bill number 220221, amending Title IV of the Philadelphia Code, the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code, by revising Section PM 202 of Subcode PM, entitled General Definitions, to revise definitions related to drinking fountains and water dispensers, and revising Section PM 502.6 of Subcode PM, entitled Schools, to add provisions related to drinking facilities in schools and requiring filtration systems, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. McGonigal. Invited to the meeting to testify, all those who will be testifying should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized in order to comply with the Sunshine Act, and the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Mr. McGonigal, will you please call the panel? We have to testify for the first bill.
Can we please have Sarah Adamo, Eloise Young, and then Thaddeus S. Taylor on Bill number 210677.
Thank you so much. If you are connected, Sarah, we'll start with you. Just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Swilla and members of the Committee of Licenses and Inspections. My name is Sarah Adamo, and I am the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 210677, which, if enacted, will amend Title IV of the Philadelphia... I'm sorry, am I on the correct one? Yes, I am. Sorry. Which will amend Title IV of the Philadelphia Code entitled the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code by modifying when notice must be given regarding demolitions, all under certain terms and conditions. If enacted, the bill will modify the existing notification policies related to demolition permits issued by the Department of Licenses and Inspections. Currently, the department notifies all properties located within a 100-foot radius of the subject property. This bill would change the radius of notification from 100 feet to 250 feet and add the council member whose district includes the property and any registered community organizations, the registered boundaries of which include the property, to be notified. The Department of Licenses and Inspections does not oppose this bill and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
Councilmember Jones, I don't know if you wanted to have a question there. It looks like you were reaching for the unmute. So please,
Thank you, Mr.
please
Chairman.
proceed.
That is correct. You saw my body language. First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I want to thank the Department of L&I for considering this bill. I recognize clearly that it has monetary consequences to it, and I'm thankful that they're willing to err on the side of notification as opposed to cost considerations. And let me briefly tell you why this bill and the bill on churches and historic structures are together. As a council person, you think you can involve yourself and impact all sorts and manner of things. I was humbled about a year ago when an institution that wanted to modify a church for legitimate purposes decided to do so, but not involve the community, not adequately notify the community about demolition. And by the time, Mr. Chairman, I got wind of how this was occurring in a significant community, it was too late. I never felt so powerless to be able to impact the quality of life for community residents. And that church facility, people, I had to listen to stories and was glad to listen to them about how their parents were married in that church, or how they were christened in that church, or how they had summer camp. And not only was that building significant by way of their history, but architecturally, if you look at some of these buildings all around the city, South Philly, Germantown, Northeast, and West Philly, you'll find these structures that are irreplaceable. If we were to try to build them under today's dollars, it would not work. So we need to better notify community groups. We need to better notify adjacent residents. When you think about 100 feet, that's not a block. It's not even half a block in some cases. So to expand the notification radius, I think is the right thing to do. And as importantly, you give the community opportunity to weigh in on decisions of demolition in the communities in which they live in. Things like safety plans. Does this building have asbestos? Have we observed the safety plan? When will the demolition begin? When will it end? Will it require me moving my car? So simple notifications that can mean so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member, for bringing this to us. It's very important, and every district throughout the city is dealing with the same type of issues, and it's so important to do this. And as you will see, some more checks and balances for some of the damages that even demolition has done to adjacent property. So we appreciate this legislation. And Mr. McMonigle, is there any other questions from any other members to L&I, Sarah? Seeing none, Mr. McMonigle, can you call the next person to testify?
Yes, can we please have Eloise Young?
Eloise, great to see you. Just state your name for the record, and then you can proceed with your testimony.
My name is Eloise Young, and I am the RCO facilitator for HMC Squared Community Association. I'm here to speak in support of Bills 210677 and 220110. As Councilmember Jones said, they are together. Every time I pass the gaping hole at 63rd and Callowhill, I sadly remember the demolition of the Our Lady of the Rosary Church building last year, a case study in what not to do. When community member Christopher Daniels first reached out to our RCO, I honestly had no personal position on it. But as I went door to door with him, it really struck me that people who lived very close to that building had no idea that it was going to be demolished. And standing on their porches, I noted the age and fragile condition of many of their homes. Total strangers shared very personal stories about weddings, funerals, times of crisis. Now, make no mistake, they weren't all in favor of saving the building, but they needed to be heard to get that story out of their consciousness and into ours. It really made me reflect on the fact that places of worship are special buildings that help transform blocks into communities, and I became outraged by the disrespect of that process. Now, whether the ultimate decision is to keep or to demolish a building, engaging the community empowers its most important stakeholders, the neighbors who will be there long after the project has ended. I thank Council Member Curtis Jones, his team, and his colleagues for introducing and urge the rest of Council to please vote to pass Bills 210677 and 220110. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eloise, for your testimony. Great job. Much appreciated. Sean, and if there's any questions, if not, we'll move on to the next testifier. Sean, please read your name.
Can we please have Thaddeus Taylor?
That.
Yep.
Just state your name for the record, and then you can proceed with your testimony.
Oh. Okay, thank you. I was having some difficulties unmuting myself.
We hear you fine.
Great. My name is Thaddeus Taylor, Reverend Thaddeus Taylor, and I am the Executive Director of Celebration Christian Services and the pastor of Celebration Christian Worship Center. I'm in support of Bills 220110 and 210677. Both deal with public notification of communities of properties being demolished and relocated. Why are we in support? We believe neighbors most impacted with a clear need of notification should be contacted about the demolition and removal of properties because it impacts them in most terms such as structural integrity, safety, tax values, and property usages. We believe also that people in the community need a chance to determine, if possible, an alternative to demolition if that alternative can be obtained. In Bill 220110, structures who have previous religious use, obviously as a pastor, I'm very concerned. I heard mentioned the one on 6030 Callahell. It's just so interesting that I was actually trying to get that property only to find out it was being demolished. Okay. Because of not only their historical value, but buildings like that serve a purpose in the community that alleviates violence and underservice by filling gaps. That notification allows another religious organization, such as mine, to step in to continue that same valuable community service. Finally, the proposed notification requirements, we believe, is in keeping with other notices, such as when you have a block party, when you're doing other special events, zoning changes, and other activities, all involving notification of neighbors. So again, we urged City Council to pass this bill. Give us a shot at some of these properties that we can use them and maintain them in our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Really appreciate that. Is there any questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anybody else to testify on this bill?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, can we please have the next group to testify?
Bill number 210740. Can we please have Sarah Adamo?
Good afternoon, Chairperson Squilla and members of the Licenses and Inspections Committee. My name is Sarah Adamo, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager of the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I am here to provide testimony on Bill number 210740, which, if enacted, will amend Chapter 9-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Trades and Chapter 9-3000 entitled Sheet Metal Technician, to create a license requirement for mechanical system contractors and to modify licensing requirements applicable to sheet metal system technicians, all under certain terms and conditions. Based on the proposed amendment, this bill would remove the requirement for individuals who successfully complete a registered sheet metal apprenticeship program to also take an examination in order to obtain a sheet metal system technician certificate. Instead, they will only need to provide proof that they successfully completed an apprentice program. The second option for obtaining a sheet metal systems technician certificate is unchanged. An individual can submit proof that they meet the qualifications for reciprocity. The department has no objection to this bill as it is proposed to be amended and is prepared to enforce its provisions should it become law. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the department's testimony. I am happy to answer questions at this time.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't see any questions out there, and that you're testifying on the bill as amended. Is there anybody with any questions for Sarah? Seeing none.
Councilman, I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Dom.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Hang on a second here. I guess in this bill, I just want to make sure I understand it. This is on 210740. In section 9-3006 of the Philadelphia Code, there's a reciprocity clause that allows those from other states who meet standards equal to or greater than those established in this chapter to apply for the sheet metal technician license and receive approvals. Can you explain to me, though, the differences between what New Jersey, Delaware, and New York are required to do in order to meet their state requirements, and how they compare to what we're asking local sheet metal workers to do, either through state requirements or local requirements? And I say that because I want to be sure that there's true reciprocity here and everyone is playing on the same field with the same rules.
I'm not familiar with the individual requirements of those different jurisdictions, but I know that they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis as applications are submitted. We would review, whether it was a state or local licensing requirement, we would review what types of things are required to obtain their license and see how they compare to our requirements.
Is that something you could check on and let us know?
Sure. What were the different jurisdictions that you mentioned?
Just New Jersey, Delaware, and New York.
Okay, sure. Yes, I can look into that and let you know.
So I do have another question on this bill, and that is in section 9-3005, again on the sheet metal systems apprentice permits. It stipulates in section 2B that in order to receive an apprentice permit, the applicant must be enrolled in a registered sheet metal technician apprentice program. Can you kind of describe what the word enrolled versus participates means to the Department of L&I when reviewing the permit applications?
So currently the legislation does say enrolled, so we have not considered what the difference would be if it were changed to participates. If that were proposed, we would have to review that with law to determine how we would review that. But right now it's a state requirement. I believe the state uses the word registered. So if you're registered in an apprentice program, we would consider you to be enrolled in that program.
Okay. Last question for you, Sarah. At least for now. It's my understanding the Pennsylvania Code requires 576 classroom hours for any registered apprenticeship program. But I think the Philadelphia Code requires 800 classroom hours. I couldn't find it this morning in the code, but can you describe why there's a difference in requirements between what the state requires and what we're requiring for classroom hours?
So you are correct. The state does require 576, whereas the Philadelphia Code requires 800. I believe that requirement was put in, I believe, somewhere around 2006. So I'm not familiar with where the 800 came from, but it is in the code, and that's how we've currently enforced it as a more stringent requirement than the state currently has.
Would it make sense for us to look at adjusting this in the future?
I'm happy to discuss it. Yeah, I would like to know why the requirement is different before, saying that we would accept a lower requirement, but we're happy to talk about it.
But if the state requires 576 and we require 800, I guess my question is why?
Right.
Okay.
So I can look into that, see what I can find for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, council member. Seeing no other questions.
Mr. Chair, this is Councilman Johnson. Just want to say I'm present.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. For the record,
Just want to acknowledge I'm present.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson. You are recorded as being present for the hearing. Ms. McMonigle, can you please read the next person to testify?
Yes, can we please have Brian Bush, please?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, Brian, you sound good. Just
Okay,
state your
great.
name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Brian J. Bush. I am the Assistant Business Manager, Financial Secretary with Sheet Metal Workers Local 19. So just to start off, good afternoon. I would like to thank Chair Squilla and the rest of the committee for allowing me the time and opportunity to speak today on today's matter. We have here at Local 19, we represent over 4,300 skilled and certified workers throughout the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. We provide the highest quality craftspeople for residential, commercial, and industrial sheet metal. Our members are highly trained professionals with the knowledge and skills to provide top quality craftsmanship. When workers join our ranks, it's not only a career, they receive fair pay, great health care and retirement benefits, with the best safety skills and training throughout the industry. Sheet Metal Workers Local 19 is in favor of amending the standards for attaining the sheet metal technician's license for the city of Philadelphia, and we have worked with multiple stakeholders on this legislation. While we have worked with everybody to find a fair balance, not included today is a minor change pertaining to, just some definition language that we asked to be included The sponsor of the legislation has told us that this issue should be resolved, and we look forward to that language being added by a floor amendment when this bill is up for its second reading and final passage. So the reason for amending the standards for the license is it's to create a clearer path for qualified individuals. Many workers in the sheet metal trade have decades of experience and have obtained their journeyperson certification through a registered apprenticeship program. They worked allotted hours and received the necessary classroom instruction to perform their craft at the highest skill level within the city limits. This amendment ensures qualified workers are able to receive the license while removing some of the roadblocks and the law currently has in place. Under those proposed standards, workers would have to submit proof that they have graduated from or are currently enrolled in a registered sheet metal apprenticeship program, which is recognized by the Commonwealth or the U.S. Department of Labor. Currently in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are roughly 550 or so registered apprenticeship programs. So this is not by any means meant to hinder access to this license. It's just to ensure that the qualified individuals are able to obtain it. By following this professional licensure to be in the hands of workers who have been through a registered apprenticeship program, you would be ensuring that the sheet metal work being performed within the city is being done so by the highest skilled workers who will deliver the best product possible and who also possess up-to-date safety training to protect themselves, other workers, and the public at large. I ask that the committee pass this bill as amended today and allow it to go to the full city council for consideration. Thank you very much.
Brian, thank you so much for your testimony and I appreciate your input. Are there any questions from any members of council?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Sure, Councilmember Jones.
How many tradespersons would this modification positively impact?
Well, I would say hundreds of them. I think it would really impact. And when you say tradespeople, that's from all walks of life. As long as they have, they possess the skills and, they were part of a registered apprenticeship program. And just, I'd like to add, I know a couple of the questions that Councilman Dom had asked earlier. The 576 hours, that's minimum. Because it's actually within our apprenticeship program, it's 144 hours per year minimal. So we actually train, it's probably 1,000 hours throughout our apprenticeship. So that's how it actually reads, is 576 minimal hours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And just, for New Jersey and Delaware, because Local 19 covers the tri-state area, we don't cover New York. It is the same in all three states. As a matter of fact, in New Jersey, there's actually something called an HVACR license that individuals have to have in order to just get permits for certain ductwork projects or HVAC. And I think your other question was enrolled or participates. I think the language is stronger as long as you're enrolled in a program, because if anybody said that they just participated, then, they could have participated in, maybe a couple weeks of the registered apprenticeship program, and maybe that it wasn't for them. And that they just got out of it. So for someone to just participate, they wouldn't really hold the correct skills and knowledge of the trade. in order to receive the license.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, post-COVID, HVAC systems have evolved to deal with filtration to protect people. And it's important that our labor force be maintained. And it's just, COVID just exposed so many different reasons why we need to constantly evolve in our skilled labor force so that we can address some of the issues that are impacting our health. So thank you to the author of this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you, Council Member Jones. And I know Council Member Gilmore Richardson, did you have a question?
I have a quick comment, Mr. Chair. First, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the sponsor of this legislation. I just wanted to thank Brian for his testimony and thank the sheet metal workers for all the work they do. I had an opportunity to visit the training facility earlier this week, and I can tell you, not just from that visit, but from the work we have done over the last 3 years together to ensure that we are exposing young people and individuals who seek to change their profession to careers in the trades, that it is a high quality of work that the sheet metal workers are doing. It's very technical work. I was in every part of the training facility, thanks to Joe and to Todd and to Gary. And I can tell you that we want to ensure we are working with registered apprenticeship programs, either by the U.S. Department of Labor or by a state agency to ensure safety in all of these projects. And our colleague, Councilmember Jones, talked about it as how HVAC systems are really evolving in air filtration systems in buildings to ensure safety for the workforce that's actually working in these buildings and facilities that the sheet metal workers and others are working on. So I just wanted to offer those comments, thank Brian for his testimony and all the sheet metal workers for their work. And I would highly advise for all of our colleagues to do the tour of the training facility and talk to some apprentices. We had them on our Labor Friday program a couple weeks ago. One of their apprentices, William Griffin, he actually introduced the vice president when she was here a few weeks ago. And he talked about how being enrolled in this registered apprenticeship program has changed the trajectory of his life and has provided him and his family with a family supporting and sustaining wage. So I'm honored to be at this hearing today and to vote in support of this legislation. I just wanted to get those comments on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council Member Gilmore Richardson. Very well said. Much appreciated. Council Member Dom, did you have a question?
My question was kind of answered, but I wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Bush, for your testimony. I just want to make sure, I heard Councilman Jones say how many people were positively impacted. Are we aware of anyone who would be negatively impacted?
Brian, you're muted. I don't know. Brian, there you go.
Well, I was just wondering, like, in what sense? Like, negatively impacted how?
Are any people going to be shut down from this? Are we going to hurt people? No? Okay.
No, definitely not.
And how about people, I'm going to be very direct, how about people that, A, are not in the union, are they able to get these training programs?
Yeah, that's one thing. There's, in my testimony, there's over 550 registered apprenticeship programs throughout the Commonwealth of PA. So
are there any in Philadelphia?
I know there's a few technical institutes, so I know that they were involved in welding and things like that. There's a few that we visit from time to time to try to bring the students into our apprenticeship program, because we have a very large outreach program that we try to, besides the tri-state area. Inner city kids, I'm sure you know about Reverend Bobby Paul through Piney Grove Baptist Church. he is very involved in, the outreach program for probably the past close to 30 years. And, he goes through those facilities, goes to different job career fairs, stuff like that, to invite these students into our program. He was actually recognized before COVID, I think within a year before COVID, before the pandemic hit us. He was very involved, and he received some type of certificate, not a certification, but an award from City Council. But, one thing that this is going to do, they're supposed to be just throughout, the United States. They're supposed to be, like Councilman Jones was talking about. The pandemic has really created opportunity when it comes to HVAC work. There's supposed to be 45,000 jobs coming just for that alone. So the amount of opportunity this is going to create for individuals for a new career is going to be phenomenal. And, other parts of, I don't know if any of you ever saw the test that needs to be taken for this. I hate to say it has nothing to do with sheet metal work. So that's the roadblock that we talk about. We've had members take the test. They've passed, but it has nothing to do with sheet metal work. It talks about, it's more of like an engineering test, if you really looked at it. So, but it'll definitely open the doors and create more opportunity for individuals. So, I think this is going to be a positive change for a lot of people, especially in Philadelphia.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm sorry for the long response.
Okay, thank you. Bush.
That was pretty good from not knowing what to say in the beginning. So thank you, council member. Not seeing any other questions. Mr. McMonagle, is there anyone else here to testify on this legislation?
No one further on this bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for testifying. Can we please read the next panel to testify on the next bill?
Bill number 220110. Can we please have Sarah Adamo first?
Sarah, just proceed. Just state your name again and proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Adamo, and I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager with the Department of Licenses and Inspections. I'm here to provide testimony on Bill number 220110, which, if enacted, will amend Section A-303 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Demolition and Relocation of Structures to add additional requirements for the issuance of demolition permits for structures currently or previously used as religious facilities, all under certain terms and conditions. I am joined today by Mason Austin, Senior Planner of the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. If enacted, this bill will require L&I to verify the age and current and former uses of a structure prior to the issuance of a demolition permit. If the structure is at least 50 years old and is currently or was formerly used as a religious facility, the department is required to take the following steps before issuing a permit for demolition. First, the department shall notify the district council member and the registered community organization, or RCO, of the application. Then the department must confirm that the RCO held a meeting to discuss the demolition of the structure within 30 days of receiving the notice of demolition. Lastly, the department is required to consider the position of the RCO in making the decision of whether to issue the demolition permit. L&I has concerns with the legislation and our ability to effectively enforce it. First, L&I believes that it is imperative to make an exception for structures that are designated imminently dangerous or unsafe, especially if their condition impacts the public right-of-way or an adjacent property. It is crucial that these structures be brought into compliance as soon as possible, and subjecting these properties to the provisions of this bill would cause significant delays in their permitting. Additionally, L&I does not currently interact directly with the RCOs. In the instances that RCOs are currently involved in the permitting process, the interactions are with City Planning Commission, and it occurs after L&I completes the review and makes our final decision on the application. Lastly, L&I is unable to take into consideration anything outside of the building code when issuing a permit for demolition. Any other concerns that the RCO may present will not be considered when determining whether to issue the permit. Given the concerns discussed, the Department of Licenses and Inspections cannot support this bill as written. We would be happy to work with the bill sponsors to address some of these concerns. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the administration. We are happy to answer questions at this time.
Well, I see, I know who's going to ask questions. So, Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I want to thank the Department of L&I for bringing critical points to our attention. One, if we're talking about eminently dangerous properties, then we're more than willing to amend this legislation to exclude them. The other thing is that they're right about certain aspects of how does one consider the RCO opinion, A. B, if they disagree on that opinion, who should that conflict be referred to for further review and also appeal. So what we have agreed to do, and we would like to pass this out of committee, but not do a final vote until we've had an opportunity to work with L&I to talk about some of the issues that they rightfully raised, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones, and your always willingness to work through challenges and coming up to a compromise that could work for all. Is there any other questions to Sarah on this legislation? Seeing none. Mr. Monaco, is there anybody else to testify?
Yes, can we please have Patrick Rossi or?
Patrick, just state your name for the record and then you can proceed with your testimony.
And you said it right, Sean. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and fellow council members. My name is Patrick Rossi. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. The Alliance wishes to express its strong support for Bill number 220110, and we thank Council Member Jones, Gautier, and Dom for their attention to this issue. Simply stated, amidst a historic residential development boom, churches and historic sites of worship are among the most vulnerable to demolition and volatile change in our city. In 2017, the Pew Charitable Trust identified 839 historic sacred places across the city. The vast majority of those remain active places of worship, but challenges are present and persist. Many congregations are dwindling, their neighborhood contexts are changing rapidly in some cases, and almost all of them struggle or piece together ways to adequately maintain their aging facilities. Moreover, fewer than 180 of these churches, mosques, and synagogues are historically designated in any way, whether on the National Register, which is largely honorific and encourages reuse, or on the local Philadelphia Register, which provides the strongest form of protection against demolition and insensitive alteration. It's no surprise that churches are attractive targets for demolition and redevelopment. They tend to be situated on large parcels, nestled amidst row house neighborhoods. Absent historic protections and incentives, most churches are frankly just highly vulnerable to the whims of speculative development. So this bill, and I'm not unsympathetic to some of the concerns that L&I has raised, and I hope and trust that they could be resolved, but this bill would at least put a pause on what is often a rash decision: the demolition of a historic religious property, beloved neighborhood landmarks that are 50, 100, in some cases nearly 200 years old. Churches, religious places, and the people who worship in them are resilient. Philadelphia has many examples of successful conversions of churches to modern uses, whether housing, office space, even recreational use. And there are always opportunities in lieu of demolition to simply continue religious use with a new congregation, something that has been demonstrated throughout the city's history. As demographics shifted in the mid-20th century, countless Black Baptist and African Methodist Episcopal churches in Philadelphia adopted the existing buildings of the white European parishes and congregations that came before them and made those buildings their own. So whatever the outcome in these matters, these decisions, these places, their stakeholders all deserve and require far more time and reflection than the process currently allows. So we again express our strong support for this bill. We thank the council members and their staffs for their attention to the issue. We hope it sets a productive precedent for not just historic places of worship, but historic properties across our city. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Patrick, on your testimony, and it's so true, and we really appreciate your support and efforts that during these processes. Mr. McMonagle, can you please, does anybody have any questions of Patrick? Let's see, Councilmember Jones?
Looks like Jones.
Yeah, just Mr. Chairman, very quickly, I want to thank the Preservation Alliance for educating council members as to the importance of preservation. There is a book, I believe it's called The Geography of Nowhere. And in the book, it talks about modern architect design, construction, and when you remove historically significant landmarks, that you could basically spin yourself around 3 times, not know what city or what state you're in without those kinds of key points of reference. And so these buildings add to the richness of neighborhoods. And I've learned, thanks to your organization, to appreciate those things. And want to thank you publicly for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll just say thank you, council member, and we're likewise appreciative of the reception that those education efforts have received, that there is legislative activity and action around preservation in a material way for the first time in a long time. So we likewise appreciate that, and more to come. So thanks again.
And I like to piggyback that too. So thank you, because being the first World Heritage City in the country, we should be leading the way in preservation, and we're not. So we need to do more. And the advocacy and even the mayor's historic task force that was put into place, and hopefully some of more of these recommendations can get legislation to be created and passed, will go a long way to preserving some of our historic fabric of our great city, and the first city of this country that really made a difference in why this country is the way it is. So thank you for all your efforts here. This is great. Council, Mr. McMonagle, is there anybody else to testify on this legislation?
Yes, can we please have Eloise Young?
Yes, actually, I said my name is Eloise Young, and when I spoke before, I spoke about both bills.
Yes.
However, Christopher Daniels, who was hoping to testify, is actually teaching a class at another Catholic church, St. Donato's, and he asked me to read his statement. So is that okay if I can read his brief statement?
Sure, go ahead.
He says, "My name is Christopher Daniels, and I'm speaking to express my support of the Bill 220110 entitled Demolition and Relocation of Structures that were previously used as religious facilities. Last summer, I, along with several other HMC Squared members, fought tirelessly to save the 134-year-old Our Lady of the Rosary Church, a landmark of West Philly. Neighbors and former parishioners did not know of demolition until the fencing went up. This bill will allow community members to have a voice in the protection of culturally significant institutions." Thank you.
Thank you so much for jumping in there and reading that testimony. Much appreciated. Mr.
I have a question.
Oh, Councilmember Johnson?
Yes. I just have a question for the author of the bill.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yes, Mr. Member Johnson.
Yes, I just want to and I think I'm on the bill as well, and I definitely support the spirit of it as well. But I just want to get an idea of, and I think I saw this happening in West Philadelphia, a boys' Latin charter school, right? So in a couple of churches in my district, in terms of dealing with the pastors, right? Now, I support, the maintaining of historical, buildings in the area. But when you do have that church that may be in a bind because they have 2 or 3 parishioners that are attending the church, but they still trying to keep up with the bills, and they do decide to move on, right? This only applies to the demolition component, correct?
So yes, this deals.
Okay.
This wait a minute. It deals with a 2-prong approach. Number one, if I live in that community, I worshiped in that community, I'm just a resident of that community, I should have enough time to know that this building that used to provide me shade or some kind of beautification is going to be gone. And what happens is all too often people rush to get it done. And in the case of Boys Latin, they said, well, Councilman, we would wait, but we want to be ready for the fall semester so that our children can come back to school. So, the community struggled, L&I struggled with this concept, and eventually they were, based on their permits, allowed to tear it down. A year later, they haven't even began construction. So what was the rush? So giving people time to provide alternative uses, I think, is an important thing. Then the second part of this is some of those beautiful design churches we'll never get back again. Like once they're gone, there's not going to be a Vatican effort from Rome to come back and come in the middle of South Philly, North Philly, West Philly, Northeast, and build these new Gothic temples to worship in. It's not going to happen. So we should be slow and deliberate about whether or not we want them to become dust. And so the 2 prongs are notification to the public and consideration of the significance historically of the structure.
I agree. And I also just want to follow up on one component you talked about when you mentioned that the building may become dust. And I just want to also say, or condos. So
yeah, you're right.
That's the flip side. And I think Councilman Squilla had to build something similar just to try to be supportive of developers who do buy these buildings, that they are provided certain incentives if they maintain the historical fabric and structure of some of these historical and beautiful buildings. I just wanted to just get additional clarity on it.
You're right. So there was a big fire at 65th and Lansdowne of a historic church. We were lucky not to lose life in that fire. But one of the considerations about the reconstruct was actually literally taking stones from the old structure and applying it to the facade of the new building, which was going to be residential. So those kinds of considerations, inputs, comments, in the case of Boys Latin, some people just wanted the hinges of the door. They wanted to look at the artwork that was in there. And a lot of that was not allowed because of the urgency of demolition. So we wanted to press pause, slow it down, inform people, and consider options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, guys. Mr. McMonagle, is there anybody else to testify on this legislation?
Ms. Morello asked that her comments be added to the record. And we understand Christopher Daniels cannot make it at the moment. So the last person on this bill should be Thaddeus Taylor.
Thaddeus, are you available?
You're welcome. Have a good day. Bye.
Yes, I am.
All right, state your name for the record, and then you can proceed with your testimony.
Okay. My name is Thaddeus Taylor, Reverend Thaddeus Taylor. We're in support of this bill because of just some of the things that have already been discussed. We honestly believe that it should be given to the neighborhood to find maybe alternative uses, as well as the fact that these structures have been in our fabric. And I grew up in Philadelphia, so I've been looking at them all my life, and I'm almost 70 years old. So we just believe that we need to find other uses other than just demolition. And we do understand that demolition may be the only alternative. So we're not saying that. But where there is a possibility of alternative use, we just would like to have that explored. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any other people to testify for bill number 220110? Hearing none. Thank you for that. Mr. McMonagle, can you please read the title, the people testifying on bill 220221?
Yes. Bill number 220221. Can we please have Laurel Gerbach? I'm sorry, Laurel.
That's okay.
Laurel, just state your name for the record and you can proceed with your testimony.
My name is Laura Gerbach, and I am the new Director of Advocacy and External Engagement for the School District of Philadelphia. I'm here today to testify on 220221, sponsored by Councilmember Gim, which addresses lead in drinking water in district buildings. We appreciate Councilmember Gim's focus on our city's children and their public schools, and we wholeheartedly agree that the safety of our students and staff is our first priority. To that end, I wanted to provide today some additional information on the district's work around providing quality drinking water. DP conducts water testing on a 5-year cycle. The district standard for drinking water, which is 10 parts per billion of lead, meets the city's legal standard for education buildings and is more strict than the legal standards set by the EPA. Right now, we're in the midst of a testing cycle which began in 2018. More than half of district buildings have been tested in this cycle, and all district-run student-occupied buildings were sampled in 2016 to 2017. The way this process works is that families are notified before testing starts, after the results come back, and when an entire building has passed inspection. During the testing, if any hydration station exceeds the district's lead threshold, it's taken offline, and an action plan is created within 30 days of the receipt of that result. Action plans could be things like taking the outlet offline permanently, repairing the outlet, applying a filter, or replacing the outlet with something new, state-of-the-art, which we call a hydration station that filters lead to acceptable standards. And our long-term plan is to have safe filtered hydration stations installed district-wide by 2025, which comply with the standards set forward by this legislation that we're considering today, and which will also fulfill the requirements set forth in the Philadelphia Code based on the number of students served in the building and with one station on at least every occupied floor. We appreciate Councilmember Gim's willingness to partner with us to find funding for this endeavor, which we are now using federal relief dollars to accomplish. We thank the council member for her collaboration on this legislation, and if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take those back to our technical experts and provide you with an answer.
Thank you, Laura, for your testimony. Real quick on a question on that. So the resources are there to have this. So it's just, again, is it just a capacity issue that you can't do it?
Yes, and it's something that definitely will be done on the timeline that's set forward in this legislation. So it is a capacity issue of the actual timing to get it done.
So you will be able to comply with the legislation to complete the...
Yes, that's our hope.
Okay, that's our hope too. Thank you. Is there anybody else for any questions? Councilmember Gim, I see you had signed on. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Is there anybody else to testify on bill number 220221?
There are, Councilman. Can we please have Willie Dwayne Francis III? Francois.
Will, are you logged in? Ready to testify? Just state your name for the record and then you can proceed. Councilmember Gim, before we go to the next testimony, do you want to make a statement or any questions on this legislation?
Yes, just a few brief remarks. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and apologize for the delay. So I want to thank Councilmember Squilla, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to my colleagues on this committee for your consideration of today's legislation. The heart of this legislation is very clear. Every student deserves clean and safe drinking water. This bill is our opportunity to finish the work that we began 6 years ago in this council body to vastly expand water access and eliminate lead from drinking water in every school in the city. I was first motivated by this work because of the horrors of what happened in Flint, Michigan back in 2014, when hundreds of people, including children, were poisoned because the city failed to treat corrosive water flooding through residential lead pipes. We vowed that it would never happen in Philadelphia, and together in 2016, this council body led a package of bills to improve water safety and reduce lead exposure in schools and in daycare centers. And as part of this work, the committees on children and youth and education held school town halls and heard from young people about the lack of access to water, clean water, basic water in their schools, where they went to schools where fountains were frequently shut off, or they washed their hands with red painted signs above sinks and faucets, warning them not to drink the water. So joining with students across the district, this council body helped win $1 million investment by the district to install modern filtration hydration stations in every single public school, one of the first citywide modernization efforts in the district in years. And we passed legislation to require annual testing of water for lead presence in our public schools. This work wasn't just necessary, it was actually embraced. We heard from students, whether they were in kindergarten or up into high school, about what it felt like to finally have something new in their schools. The work kicked off the district's Green Schools efforts. And today we are hopefully on a path towards school modernization and improvement after years of disinvestment. But it's clear this work is not finished. Issues with lead in drinking water in our schools continue to persist despite these efforts. Recent testing revealed detectable lead in water fountains across the school system, and a few fountains were found to have high levels of lead despite previously testing below the city's threshold. So that brings us to today's legislation before you, which will finish the work that was started back in 2016. It mandates that all water fountains be converted to filtered hydration stations to effectively eliminate lead from the drinking water in every single school by 2025. These systems will be equipped with advanced filters that have consistently demonstrated an ability to reduce lead to undetectable levels. And all will have filter change indicators that meet rigorous standards. So, to be clear, in conjunction with this legislation, last week I also introduced a complementary ordinance to adjust the testing requirements on these stations, which have been proven effective in eliminating lead. And from there, our focus now shifts to ensuring these stations are accessible and operating with up-to-date filters. But the complementary legislation, which will move forward in this council session, will help reduce kind of the burdens that some schools have on testing. It will help streamline our efforts and assist with some of the financials of that. We already have a commitment from the district to invest over $6 million in the next few years to fully transition to hydration stations, which is in line with this legislation. And I want to thank our partners at the School District of Philadelphia for this investment. I also want to clearly recognize that this legislation reflects work that has been continually advanced and pushed by our school communities. There have been tremendous advocates at PennPIRG, at Penn Environment, and the Black Church Center for Justice and Equality who have provided critical analysis and have rallied grassroots volunteers to help move all of this work forward. But I just, would really want to thank this committee and my colleagues for understanding how important it is for municipalities to fulfill not only our duties, our legislative duties, but our moral responsibilities to ensure safety for all young people in every school, in every community, in every neighborhood. Thank you for the consideration and to the testifiers here today who are speaking in support of the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Gim, for bringing this to us and to ensure safety in our drinking water in all our schools. Much appreciated. Is there any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And quick thank you to the bill sponsor, Councilmember Gim. And obviously, I am supportive of this legislation. As a graduate of the Philadelphia Public School System and former employee at the School District of Philadelphia, and now parent of soon to be, hopefully, 3 young people in the School District of Philadelphia. So I want to thank you for your work on this. I just wanted to get on the record because you talked about revenue and funding for this initiative and being able to comply with the tenets of this legislation. And obviously revenue is necessary to do that. If you could just, for the record, and I know I've been working with the district on this, talk about where you are in process, if you know, for the WIN grant through the Environmental Protection Agency that we sent to the School District of Philadelphia. It's a grant that specifically targets reducing lead in drinking water in disadvantaged communities and remediation in schools and child care facilities. And I know that as soon as I got that information, being on the Local Government Advisory Committee, I sent it over to the school district, and you all stated that you have submitted that application to go for funding. I heard Councilmember Gim say a figure of $6 million thus far, but that grant opportunity will be at least $20 million that obviously will be awarded across the country. And so for the record for this hearing, I just wanted to get it on the record of sort of where you are in process, if you've heard anything and what's going on with that opportunity, because that can help us to eliminate some additional buildings.
Great. Thank you, council member. So I am aware of this, and I know that you've talked to folks at the district about it, and I can get you an update later today on where that process stands.
Okay, that'll be great. And you can send that to our chair and members of this committee, as well as the sponsor of this legislation,
Sure.
so that we have an opportunity to vie for revenue to help us with this issue, particularly as President Biden is focusing a lot of his efforts via his Justice 40 initiative that will really help municipalities like Philadelphia. Okay, so thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Richardson. Mr. McMonagle, is there a next person to testify on this legislation? Councilmember Elby, you have a question before we move on to the next person testifying?
No, I do not.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
McMonagle, please read the next person to testify.
Yes, can we please have Dr. Marilyn Howarth?
Thank
Yes.
you, Doctor. Just state your name for the record, and then you can continue with your testimony.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Marilyn Howarth, an occupational and environmental medicine physician working at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. The Philadelphia Regional Center for Children's Environmental Health and the Center of Excellence in Environmental Toxicology would like to thank Philadelphia City Council for the opportunity to support these, with these comments, to support the bill 220221. Thousands of research articles on lead exposure document its health effects on children in the first few years of life. Young children in Philadelphia can easily be exposed to very large amounts of lead through the combination of exposures, including paint, drinking water, and soil. For most children, peeling lead paint is the single largest source of lead exposure, but the American Academy of Pediatrics reports that drinking water can be up to 20% of a children's blood lead level. Once in the body, lead kills nerves in the brain, interfering with thinking and behavior. Lead blocks the production of hemoglobin, leading to anemia. Researchers at CETA have found that an early life exposure to lead results in lasting sleep disruption. In recognition of the harmful effects of lead on children and the acknowledgement that there's no safe blood lead level, the CDC lowered the reference level for blood lead to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter this year. The PA Department of Health expects that the number of Philadelphia children identified with elevated blood leads will approach 5,000 in Philadelphia this year. Philadelphia school drinking water testing results are only publicly available for 29% of schools. Whereas the EPA allows for drinking water to have lead levels up to 15 parts per billion, Penn Environment found 14 schools out of 60 for which school district data is available with levels of lead in drinking water more than 10 times the EPA drinking water standard. 8 of those schools had levels 100 times higher than the EPA acceptable levels. A student drinking 1 glass of water from any of those outlets would be lead poisoned. 1 glass of water. The district has installed some hydration stations, but teachers are often unaware of the existence of that single hydration station located in their school, or say that it's too far from their classroom. Teachers and parents advise students to not drink the water because they're unsure of its quality. This poses a health risk of dehydration, especially as we expect more days with higher temperatures due to climate change. This ordinance would ensure that every child has access to safe drinking water by establishing 1 hydration station for every 100 children in a school. It also would require an indicator light clarifying that the filter was operational. The ordinance also specifies the appropriate EPA filter for lead. As a physician and a mother, I find it appalling that an ordinance would be needed to provide safe drinking water to children in schools in the United States of America. The school district has been aware of lead contamination in drinking water for decades, and their slow response to installing enough lead filters on drinking water outlets displays their willingness to sacrifice the health of Philadelphia children. Indeed, even when enough hydration stations are present, there still will be water outlets in schools that are lead tainted. Every water source in classrooms or those accessible to children should be tested, and every one with elevated lead levels should be turned off or retrofitted with a lead filter. We know better than to expect children to pay attention to signs or avoid using fountains with yellow tape. Adults should take responsibility for protecting children. Furthermore, we encourage the school district to be more transparent in releasing all acquired data on this topic in a more timely manner to gain the confidence of the parents and community in providing safe water that fully meets the US EPA drinking water standards. We urge City Council to take this common sense action and pass Ordinance 220221 to protect children at school. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Much appreciated. Sean, can you please read the next person to testify?
Yes, can we please have Jerry Roseman?
Jerry, just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Roseman. I'm the Director of Environmental Science for the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, Health and Welfare Fund and Union, and the Environmental Science Advisor to the Philadelphia Healthy Schools Coalition. Passage of the proposed filtered hydration station legislation will, I believe, help to substantially lower the levels of lead contamination in Philadelphia school drinking water. I'm also calling for urgently needed improvements in district data and information sharing and accountability, an especially critical element of a successful and publicly engaged facilities planning process, as well as to ensure verified implementation of best practices for addressing environmental hazards. Initial testing and remediation of school drinking water started 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago in 1999, when the EPA ordered the district to evaluate all outlets for lead contamination. Although some improvements followed the 10-year EPA enforcement action, continuing concerns about school drinking water quality and safety, especially following news stories about water contamination in Flint, Michigan, resulted in renewed advocacy by the PFT and others, and from city council members, leading to several important initiatives in 2016 and 2017, including the passage of legislation to lower the allowable level of lead in drinking water then by 50%, from 20 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. Lead testing of school water began again in 2016, but those testing efforts did not fully meet the requirements of the new bill. So starting in late 2018, the current ongoing testing program started. During each testing program, the district promised to partner with the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers and other stakeholders, including sharing and reviewing of data. They also agreed to discuss ongoing efforts and best practice solutions. Unfortunately, very little of the expected collaboration and data actually occurred. In late 2021, as part of an American Heart Association project, Penn Environment and their research arm, PennPIRG, with the Black Church Center for Justice and Equality engaged me to analyze available school district lead and drinking water data. Because updated data was not provided by the district, we used what was available on the district's website, again at the time, which although limited, still documented worrisome levels of lead in many drinking water outlets and in many schools. At the same time, we found the lead levels in filtered hydration stations to be below the 1 part per billion level recommended by public health authorities. That's why having all school drinking water provided by filtered hydration stations is so important. Especially with a new superintendent about to come on board, and as the district engages in comprehensive facility planning process, a new, more transparent, collaborative district culture and set of practices and procedures is urgently needed if we hope to successfully and efficiently and equitably modernize and upgrade our schools and protect our children. Recognizing that this bill has a full implementation date of 2025, I'd strongly encourage the Philadelphia School District to substantially accelerate the process to the extent possible to better protect all of our students. Thanks so much to Councilman Kim and all those co-sponsoring and supporting bill number 220221 for all the hard work and taking tangible steps to putting all children first in improving Philadelphia school building conditions. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Jerry, thank you so much for your testimony, as always, and your input. Your knowledge is priceless to us here on council, and to be able to massage through the lead paint legislation and now the asbestos legislation and the water, we are, even though it seems slow, we are making positive changes, and we just appreciate your willingness to continue to move us in the right direction in collaboration with the PFT, obviously, and the school district. So none of these things are easy, but you know what? When we're determined, we will get there. So I just want to I have no questions for you, but I do want to make that comment. Thank you so much. Is there any questions for Jerry? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Next person to testify is Emma. Is Emma available?
Yes, hello.
Hey, Emma, just state your name for the record, and you can proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
My name is Emma Horst Martz, and I'm an advocate with PennPIRG, the Public Interest Research Group. I want to thank Chairman Squilla and members of the committee for having me here today to discuss this important public health issue. PennPIRG is a statewide grassroots advocacy organization working to protect the public from threats to their health, safety, and well-being. Our Philadelphia office is based in South Philly, and I'm here on behalf of our members from across the city. I also grew up in Germantown, and I currently live in Center City. So the problem that we're all here to solve is pretty straightforward. Lead is a potent neurotoxin that's particularly harmful for young kids whose brains and bodies are still developing. It can lead to a lifetime of health problems, and health experts warn that there's no safe level of lead exposure. Unfortunately, while writing the report that's already been mentioned, using the data from the district's water testing program, we found that 98% of public schools tested had some amount of lead in the water, and 61% of all the outlets tested had lead at least 1 part per billion in the water. While only 29% of public schools had been tested and the results posted on the website as of February, it was clear from this research and this pattern of contamination that this would be an issue consistent across the rest of the schools as they continue with the testing. So the solution to this crisis is fairly straightforward. We need to get the lead out of schools' drinking water. And last summer, we began calling on the district to allocate a small portion of the $1 billion in federal ARPA funds to replace the old fountains with lead filtering hydration stations to ensure that kids have safe water to drink at school. Since launching this campaign, we have seen overwhelming support from the community for this project. More than 70 community organizations from across the city have signed on to a letter of support, Community members have signed petitions and called the district directly, called their city council members, and more than 60 volunteers participated in a lobby day with many of your offices to share why they want the city to take action to protect kids' health. So that is why I'm incredibly grateful to Councilmember Gim for introducing her bill back in 2016 to establish the water testing program, and for introducing this bill 220221 this spring to build on that progress and require the district to finish installing hydration stations in all of the schools. I know that some of you helped pass the original law in 2016, and many of you are co-sponsors on this bill, so I want to thank you for that support. A few weeks ago, the school district announced their plan for all of you with the budget, the 2022-2023 budget, to allocate that $6.2 million towards installing 800 more hydration stations across 269 buildings by the year 2025. This is what we've been asking for all year, so it's very encouraging to see this strong public commitment from district leaders. And I ask you, members of the committee, to support this legislation today that will really codify the district's plan and hold them accountable to benchmarks and the finish line of 2025. It'll be crucial to stay in communication with the district throughout this process. And the public should get regular updates on how many hydration stations are installed in schools, which schools they're being installed in, and what that schedule looks like until 2025. So thanks again to Councilmember Gim and her staff for their leadership on this issue, the co-sponsors on the bill, Chairman Squilla for prioritizing this issue in committee today, and to members of the committee for your time. Thank you.
Emma, thank you so much for your testimony and points very well taken. Much appreciated. Councilmember Jones, you have any questions? No. Okay. Mr. McMonagle, can you please read the next person to testify?
I'd like to apologize in advance if I mess this up. Christian Agungbemi.
Christian, are you available to testify? If not, Mr. McMonagle, would you read the name of the next person to testify?
Maria Mendez.
Hello.
Hey, Maria, just state your name for the record and you can proceed with your testimony.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I just got out of school. Okay. My name is Maria Los Angeles Mendez. I am a senior in high school, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of Fuerza, a Latinx immigrant youth program at Juntos, and all students that have experienced this injustice of safe drinking water within our school system. I am here testifying today in support of Council Gim's bill to ensure all drinking water outlets in every school are filtered for lead. I am in disbelief that I have to be advocating for students to have access to clean water when it is a basic human right. Not having access to safe water has become a norm for our students. Many of our youth at Fuerza have expressed to us how their water fountain filters haven't been cleaned since the beginning of the school year, and how unsafe they feel drinking water from these fountains. There are many schools across Philadelphia where lead has been found within the water students drink every day. Earlier this week, as I was prepping for this testimony, I looked up Philadelphia schools' lead in water, and 44 million results came up, top 10 being from this year alone. I was stunned by the number, however not surprised, because this once again shows the lack of investment in our schools. One article went as far as 2004, the year I was born, and even then it wasn't a new issue, because we've been seeing this issue go unaddressed for decades. We are in a pandemic, and more than 60% of all outlets across 65 Philly public schools tested positive for lead. Now is the time for large systemic changes. We ask the city leadership commit to ensure and holding all schools across Philadelphia accountable for having schools that are truly safe for our students. We ask that our new superintendent, Tony B. Wallington, further this commitment upon starting his tenure by addressing the long-standing issue of unsafe infrastructure in Philadelphia public schools. As a community, we demand change now. This is the bare minimum for our students. Although having clean water is a good start, we need real reinvestment in our schools' infrastructure that is consistent and proactive. We need to make sure this isn't another unfulfilled promise. Even though I'm a senior, it is important to me to make change now to ensure all future students have clean and safe learning environments where they don't have to worry about infrastructure problems like how we do now. And this is only the first step of ensuring schools become true places of sanctuary. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Great job. And you didn't sound like you were out of breath. So we really appreciate you taking that effort to come here. It's so important for us to hear that, especially from a student. I know, Councilmember Gim, I see you. Do you have a question or comment?
No, I just wanted to thank Ms. Mendez again for representing both herself, her school, Fuerza, and all the work that you've been doing to bring attention to the conditions of our public schools. I mean, this is where you go to school 6 hours a day, 180 days a year as mandated by law. And it's not a place where, it's a place where young people should feel able to thrive and grow. And I think you spoke to that so beautifully. And I know that you are a senior who's fighting for your siblings and for your classmates' siblings and for those who are generations to come. And I hope you'll remember that you'll be the generation that helped end lead in drinking water in our schools. And as you said, there's so much more to do, but your generation did that. And I think that that's just something that I'm incredibly grateful to you for and for speaking so beautifully about it. So thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you, Councilmember
Thank you so much for hearing me.
Great job. All right, Mr. McMonigle, could you please read the next person to testify?
Yes, can we please have Sharice Moses?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hey, Sharice, just state your name for the record and you can proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
No problem. My name is Sharice Moses. I am the mother of 3 young children matriculating through the Philadelphia public and private school system. I am also a founding member of the Philly Children's Movement, where we help families and educators tackle race and social justice issues plaguing our country. I appear before you today regarding the current conditions of our school buildings and the importance of implementing one of many needed changes to make our schools physically safer, not only for my children, but all children in Philadelphia. As an activist who primarily works with children and families, I see the firsthand effect of having access to necessary resources. Having clean water to drink is one of those items. My oldest child is autistic, epileptic, has ADHD, and drinks a lot of water. However, he only drinks spigot water by his choice. As such, I often worry about the quality of the water that he is drinking and how the contaminants might influence his diagnosis and daily life. Because of the amount of water my children consume daily, it is imperative each school, has a water filtration system. As we all know, school is not often just a place for education, but often a refuge from home for many children. Our children deserve the best resources, and as their guides, it is our responsibility to provide them. I firmly believe that this is just one necessary step in the process of moving to make our buildings a safer space for our children. As Khalil Gibran has eloquently stated, our children are our arrows into the future. Please make this bill one of many to securing our future, as water is a basic human right and need. Thank you.
Sharice, thank you so much for your testimony.
Point of information.
Councilmember
Mr. Chair,
Jones.
one of my favorite authors, Khalil Gibran. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gim?
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Moses. And, I love the story that you told of your son. And, there's something also about just the physical, drinking and just being physical with things that young people really need. And the things that they touch, the things that they engage with, that they interact with, they should be modern. They should be beautiful. They should be, of course, clean and safe. But I think you talk a lot about, childhood is a lot about tactile, interactions. And So much of what I think you're conveying is that the physical embracing of a space says everything about what we're going to give to our young people, how they're valued, how they're seen. We heard that early on back in 2016 when we first did these stories about young people saying that they had to put their mouths on like rusty looking water fountains that spewed out brown water at first. I mean, it was really unbelievable that you could listen to young people, whether they were 8 years old or 18 years old, talking about the indignities of that. But I think you brought forward like such a beautiful statement about your child and how much they love to interact with just like physical things. And I think that that is so childlike and so incumbent upon us then to make sure that the things that they're surrounded by, the things that they engage with, touch, whether it's people or whether it's like structures, they have to be the things that, you know, that they should be about loving our young people. So thank you so much for your testimony, for being so personal about it. And just really appreciate all the work that you've done on behalf of young people and your son as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Mr. McMonagle, is there a next person to testify?
Yes. Can we please have David DeGloze?
David, just state your name for the record, and then you can proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Sure. My name is David DeLugos. I'm in here capacity of Holmesburg Civic Association, and also formerly of Friends of Pennypack Park, which, you know, hopefully one day things will come back together for that. I'm going to speak a little bit to other aspects of this bill that other people didn't get to. So I can read from my testimony. Good afternoon, Chairman Squilla, members of the committee. My name is Dave DeLugos. I'm here to testify today in support of Bill 220221. If implemented, this bill would be a win for both the children in the district and for the environment. In this day and age, there should be no debate about drinking water in schools. In the time since I was in grade school, we have gone from bubbler fountains to vending machines, from free water to bottled water or worse. Children these days have been normalized to drinking water from single-use plastic bottles and from being able to purchase sodas and other high-sugar drinks at schools and stores all around the city. Often, the soda has been cheaper than water. And even when there are existing water fountains at school, most children would prefer to not drink water than to drink the water from the water fountain. My son's school, they have 5. You know, their school is less than 100, is about 100 kids, and they have 5 of these in their school. And if I asked my son a choice about what he would do if those weren't there, he said he wouldn't drink the water. And I have a feeling that there's a large percentage of people who would opt to not drink water as opposed to having their own water bottle at their desk. The city has come a long way in the last few years, thanks to you all, having passed the soda, the sugar tax to get to de-incentivize soda and high sugar drinks all throughout the city, and banning single-use plastic bags, Councilman Squilla. Now this bill is a common sense solution to improving the health of our children, not just for the lead, but also for their overall health. Water fillers in schools will attract much more use from students. Students will not have to worry about bacteria and viral transmission from COVID and other things. They would not need to worry about the lead from the infrastructure, and they will be able to bring water more easily to their desks without interrupting learning. From an environmental standpoint, the elimination of single-use plastic is an imperative. PWD reports that in combined sewers alone, they remove 1,000 tons of plastics every year, another 1,100 tons of plastics from the Delaware and Schuylkill rivers every year. This is the equivalent of 100,000 plastic bottles that are thrown in storm drains and washed into waterways every year in the city. The use of this plastic has become ubiquitous. Only 30 years ago, this was not even a thing. Bottled water was, you'd only hear about the gallons you buy from the supermarket store, is single-use thing with, people would look at you like you were crazy. If you were asked for water, someone would offer you a glass of water and they filled up with their tap. Since after these 30 years have passed, we've been lied to on plastic bottles when we were told that plastic bottles are recyclable and that tap water is less worthy. The tap water in Philadelphia is by and large better than most places in the country, and and the PWD I'm sure has said similar things over the years. this, again, with the recycling, as probably was said to you before about wondering why sanitation costs have gone up, China has stopped taking our plastic, and those plastics have wound up in our waterways and in our landfills. In conclusion, I urge you and your fellow council members to support this bill. This bill is a rare combination of public policy that checks so many boxes with such a simple solution, and with a way that can be easily financed with funds from the American Rescue Plan and other sources. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Great job, Dave, and thank you for your service to the city also, and the work you bring. Much appreciated. Mr. McMonagle, is there another next person to testify?
Yes, can we please have Amanda Sweeney?
Amanda, just state your name for the
Hi.
record, then you can proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Amanda Sweeney, and I'm a junior at the University of Pennsylvania and an intern with Penn Environment. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 220221, sponsored by Councilmember Gim, which would require Philadelphia school buildings to be equipped with one hydration station per 100 students. I grew up as a resident of the council's 10th district and attended kindergarten at Anne Frank Elementary School. When I was in kindergarten, my mother told me not to drink from the water fountains. At the time, I was confused as to why I could not drink from the fountains. All she would say to me that the water was dirty. I understand now that she was concerned about the lead contamination and the drinking water in the Philadelphia school district. Now, 14 years later, many children in the school district of Philadelphia still lack access to safe, lead-free drinking water. Since 2018, 98% of Philadelphia public schools that underwent testing contained some amount of lead in their water supplies. Consumption of lead can produce negative effects in people of all ages, but especially children. This potent neurotoxin leads to lifelong health complications, including a hindrance of brain development and organ damage. These children are our future, yet we fail to provide them with the bare necessities. With the installation of hydration stations, children in the school district of Philadelphia will no longer have to fear lead contamination in the water at school. For these reasons, I strongly urge this committee to vote favorably on Bill 220221. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you for your testimony. Much appreciated. Mr. McMonagle, can we read the next person to testify?
Yes, I believe we're going to go back and try and reach Christian Ogumbimi.
Christian, are you available? Who else are we trying to reach?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I don't think we're able to reach Christian at this time, but if he does want to submit his testimony, we will enter it into the record. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you all for participating in this hearing. So, next part. Is there anybody else? There's nobody for public comment, Mr. McMonagle? That has all been completed, correct?
No, Mr. Chairman, that's it.
Okay. All right, that will conclude our
Mr. Chair, I think you're on mute, Mr. Chair.
I must have muted myself. I think most people would like that, but not in this case. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I will ask that if anyone else is that we failed to call, please offer testimony for this bill to be considered today. Hearing that there is none, I want to thank all the panelists and witnesses for the participation. We value your opinions. I now invite all panelists and witnesses to please disconnect from the meeting before we go into our public meeting. We will now pause proceedings for a minute for multiple participants to leave the hearing. Okay, this concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into a public meeting to consider action to be taken on the bills before this committee today. Mr. McMonagle, can you please call the roll for the public meeting?
Councilman Dom,
Present. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson,
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Jones,
I am present.
Councilmember O, Councilmember Squilla.
Good afternoon, I'm present.
Okay. You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McMonagle. That we will now, since we have a quorum, we will now go into our public meeting. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on bill number 210677.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 210677 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Bill has been seconded by Councilmember Jones. It has been moved and properly seconded that the bill number 210677 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 220677 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading at the next session of council. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on the amendment to bill number 210740.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer an amendment to bill number 210740. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee, and move that the amendment to bill number 210740 be approved.
Second.
The amendment has been seconded by Councilmember Jones. It has been moved and properly seconded. Therefore, the amendment to bill number 210740 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, and the motion carries that the amendment to bill number 210740 has been approved. Chair now recognizes Councilman Dom for a motion on bill number 210740 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bill number 210740 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill on the next session of council.
All right.
I think that was seconded by Councilmember Jones. It has been moved and properly seconded. Therefore, the bill number 210740 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as submit first reading at our next session of council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for a motion on bill number 220110.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bill number 220110 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. The chair notes that the record that Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that the bill number 220110 be approved. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 220110 will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit this bill at the next session, the first reading of this bill at the next session of council. That will complete our hearing, our meeting for the day. No other further questions. We would like to end it. Thank you all for your help and partnership in having the L&I hearing move through. Thank you all for your testimony. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and welcome back. We are now reconvening our public meeting for the L&I committee. Mr. McMonigle, just call the roll to. Oh, he's not in. All right. So, Councilmember Dom.
Present.
Councilmember Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Squilla is present. That gives us a quorum. The meeting is now back in session. Councilmember Dom, can you please make a motion on bill number 220221?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bill number 220221 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Kathleen Gilmore Richardson. It has been moved and properly seconded. Now that bill number 220221 be approved. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Bill number 220221 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation. Further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council. I would like to apologize to Modesto and Ed for closing the meeting, but now we opened it back up and completed the meeting today. So that will conclude our meeting for good for today. Thank you all for your patience and appreciate you all getting back on. Thank you, Modesto.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Modesto and Tex team.
Thank you all very much for your attendance.
Chair.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
You
colleagues.
got it.
Bye-bye.
See ya.